I've been playing video games for a long time, basically as far back as my memory serves me. And it's never been a side hobby for me, it's been a passion. I love it. When people ask why I love video games so much, I ask them to tell me their favorite movie. And then I say, instead of watching that movie, imagine being a part of it. That's what I love so much about video games. I've played so many amazing ones over the years, and if you ask me to pick my absolute favorite, I'd tell you that it's Persona 4, or to be more specific, Persona 4 Golden. It's a game about a group of high school students who use their newfound powers to solve a murder mystery plaguing their small town. But it's about much more than that. It's about family, friendship, coming to grips with who you are deep down and embracing that part of you. Persona 4 is a truly wonderful game from top to bottom, so if you'll indulge me, allow me to tell you all about why I love it so much. To begin, let's go back to 1997 for a minute. The 3D era of gaming was in full swing with the N64 and the PlayStation. That fall, a game released that changed gaming forever, Final Fantasy VII. It was a huge 3D role-playing game, the likes of which we had never seen before. The world was huge, the story compelling, the characters interesting, and just so much more. When my friend Josh showed me this game for the first time, it blew my mind. I never thought I would play a game for a story. I never thought I could get attached to characters the way I did. I was never the same again. I was hooked on RPGs and wanted as many as I could get my hands on. I loved them maybe a little too much. Here's an old photo of me and Josh trading Pokemon instead of participating in our junior high dance. Most RPGs from that era were grand adventures where you and other warriors banded together to stop an evil force from destroying the world. But one day I came across a very different and unique kind of RPG, Harvest Moon. This wasn't a game about fighting monsters, exploring dungeons, or saving the world. It was about you tending to your grandpa's farm and growing relationships with the residents of a small town. The best part about this was that you could grow these relationships at your own pace. Heck, you could really do whatever you wanted in Harvest Moon at your own pace, and I loved that freedom. As time went on, I kept chasing a more robust Harvest Moon-like game and RPGs grander than Final Fantasy VII. Harvest Moon really was a one-of-a-kind game at the time, and nothing really scratched that itch in the same way for me, not even future sequels. As far as traditional RPGs went, nothing ever topped Final Fantasy VII for me, no matter how many different ones I tried. Eventually, I kind of stopped following games like I used to and mainly just replayed the same ones over and over. After college, I went to South Korea for a year to teach English, and it was an amazing experience. I even got to go to Japan, a lifelong dream of mine, and it was everything I could have hoped for and more. My one remaining souvenir from that trip is this cloud figure. I just couldn't leave Japan empty-handed. That trip really reignited my passion for games, in particular RPGs, and I wanted to play everything that I had missed over the years. I went on to play classics like Lunar, Grandia, Wild Arms, and much more. Then one day while I was browsing game trailers, I came across a review for a game that really caught my eye called Shin Megami Tensei Persona 4. The game basically combined what I loved most about Harvest Moon and Final Fantasy VII and mashed them together in a Japanese high school setting. I never knew this was something I wanted until that moment. Game trailers gave it a very high score, which was quite rare for them at the time, and I knew I had to play it. So I tracked down myself a copy, popped it in my PS2, and I was hooked. Persona 4 isn't your typical RPG. It's broken up into two wildly different segments: the dungeon crawling combat segments and the life sim aspects. The brilliant thing about Persona 4 is you can engage in both parts at your leisure, for the most part. Typically there's someone you need to save at the end of a dungeon by a certain calendar date, but it's usually a pretty lenient amount of time. What I like to do is finish the dungeons as soon as possible and then go deep into the life sim parts of Persona 4. What's neat about these is that they have a direct impact on other aspects of gameplay. For example, if you spend a certain amount of time with a party member, they can become more useful in combat and gain new abilities. The sheer variety of activities to do is pretty staggering, and you'll likely not be able to finish them all in one playthrough. I actually love that though. You're given quite a bit of freedom in Persona 4, and it's fun to try something new, even if it doesn't have the biggest reward. This gameplay loop of dungeon crawling and life sim activities had me completely enamored. If I ever got sick of one, I could spend time doing the other, and because there were so many side activities to try, there were always plenty of goals to strive for. Persona 4 is a 70-hour game, but I could easily have played for another 20. I was that hooked. And as excellent as all these aspects are, what really kept me playing hour after hour and why Persona 4 is still my favorite game all these years later is the characters. At the beginning of the game, you're introduced to your younger cousin Nanako, and very quickly you form a bond with her. Your uncle Dojima works a lot of late nights, and as a result, Nanako spends a lot of time by herself. It's hard not to feel empathetic towards her right away, and you can't help but care for her more as you get to know her throughout the game. And this is just one character. All the characters you encounter have their own interesting backstories. The main characters, of course, have the deepest and most interesting ones, all struggling in their own ways with Persona 4's main theme of facing your true self. Basically, facing a part of you deep down that you're ashamed or embarrassed about, and accepting that it's okay to feel those feelings. My favorite character in Persona 4 has to be Kanji Tatsumi. On the outside, he seems like your typical high school troublemaker. He's in a gang, gets into lots of fights, and also dresses the part. But he has a softer side that few people know about. His family owns a textile shop, and he's picked up a lot of craft hobbies like sewing over the years. In one moment, he even makes a stuffed animal for a little kid. His sexuality also comes into question, which is made fairly obvious in his bathhouse-inspired dungeon, but also through his crush on Naoto. Anyone who's played Persona 4 will know that Naoto is female, but when she's first introduced, everyone believes that she's a male, and this creates quite the conflict for Kanji. All these factors make Kanji a fascinating character, and he ultimately ends up in a good place by the end of the game. Through the 70+ hours, I got really attached to these characters. There's one point in the game where you're given a choice, and if you make the wrong one, a certain character close to you dies and the game ends prematurely. When this happened, I was speechless and I got super angry. This couldn't be how Persona 4 ended, and thankfully it wasn't. The reason I got so emotional was because of how I'd grown to deeply care about these characters, and they just deserved better. I can honestly admit that I teared up at the real end of the game when you get on the train to go back home and your friends are waving you goodbye. All the funny times, crazy adventures, and heartfelt moments came rushing back. These characters were like real friends, and I was sad to say goodbye. And I realize how stupid it sounds to say something like that about fictional characters in a video game, but that was the power of Persona 4 for me. To this day, I still believe that Persona 4 has the best cast of characters in any video game. To put the cherry on top of my love for this game, I got to meet the actors behind my two favorite characters, Troy Baker, who voices Kanji, and Aaron Fitzgerald, who voices Chie. I met Troy at IGN's Podcast Beyond episode 300 party. He was part of the show and also hung out after to chat and sign autographs. He's a super cool guy, and it was fun to hear him talk about Kanji.
Get bent! You say to like dudes?
Meeting Aaron was a little extra special. Back when Greg Miller was hosting IGN's Up and Noon show, I recommended that he bring on Aaron since he recently reviewed Persona 4 Golden on Vita and loved it. Everyone said yes, and fortunately for me, I worked close to IGN's office at the time and was able to be in the audience for the show.
I am so excited that I came up. I'm so glad that you actually invited me.
It's all because of this guy over here.
Thank you,
Taylor
Travis.
Hoyt.
It felt good knowing that I helped get Aaron on the show and that more people would get to know about her. Months later, she would also be a guest on my podcast, and we had a lot of fun on that.
This town's so lame, I'm feeling so wired. It's 4 a.m., I'm not even tired. We're in your car, we can drive away. Oh yeah.
In the years since, I've played a lot of fantastic games that have challenged Persona 4 for my favorite game of all time, including its sequel, Persona 5. While I have to admit that the visuals and gameplay of Persona 5 are superior in pretty much every way, I can't help but to keep coming back to Persona 4. It's not only the game itself, but the journey to discover it, the conversations about it, and all the wonderful people I've met because of it. And with all these things put together, that, my friends, is why, at least for now, Persona 4 is still my favorite game of all time.
We can drive through the night, sing along to the midnight radio. Don't wanna wait all my life, can't remain, no delay, gotta let go. A